We start now our European tour of good practice examples of automatic access control, starting in London. Shirley Rodrigues, welcome to our event, and thank you very much that you take time to present us the results of London's congestion charging and ultra low emission zone. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions to the report of Shirley Rodrigues, please use the Q&A section and please post your questions in English so that Shirley can answer them after her presentation. Shirley Rodrigues, we are looking very much forward to your presentation. Please start.
Thank you for the invitation to share a bit about what we're doing in London. I'm currently the chair of the Breathe Cities Advisory Committee, which is an NGO helping a number of cities around the world tackle air pollution, reduce air pollution by 30% by 2030. And I was former London Deputy Mayor between 2016 and 2024 for Mayor Sadiq Khan. And in terms of air pollution and congestion, we all know how big an issue this is in our cities as the world urbanizes. Air pollution is now accounting for over 8 million deaths a year. It's the second leading risk factor for death ahead of tobacco use, so meaning people are increasingly more likely to die from breathing our toxic air than from smoking. And of course, congestion is a huge economic cost to our cities, affecting our competitiveness. But cities like London, like yours, are key locations for action because of their huge centres of innovation. And we can tackle climate change at the same time as tackling air pollution and congestion. And we have a strong civil society that can help us with community-led action. So the next slide. There are broadly 3 schemes in London, one tackling congestion, the congestion charge, but the other 2, the low emission zone and the ultra low emission zone, are ones focusing on air pollution specifically. Next slide. In terms of the congestion charge, this was groundbreaking when it was introduced 20 years ago. It delivered huge traffic reductions in traffic levels and congestion pretty much overnight. And it showed that we don't need to accept congestion or roads dominated by traffic. But key to that success was the provision of high quality and viable alternatives for people to use, for people driving to work into that central area of London. More buses and better tubes. And of course, more recently, we've been doing much more pedestrianisation and cycle lanes. So I think the key thing about this was that, really looking at this as more than a transport scheme, but one about a vision for your city. So this was particularly a vision for what we wanted London to be. So you'll see there's some very good numbers, but over time, those benefits have eroded. London is apparently now the most congested city in Europe. It has, just for context, it covers 50% of all daily UK traffic just in London. And whilst our traffic speeds have really dropped pretty much to what they were in 2003 when the scheme was introduced, there are some good reasons for this. It's a small city with small road space. That road space has been reallocated to bus and cycle lanes, pedestrianisation. We have a lot of roadworks, which means the limited road space. But also the charge level, whilst it's increased over time, hasn't been set at a sufficient level to deter traffic. And it was last increased in 2020 to £15 a day. And we've also seen huge increases in population. Around 15% London's population has increased since around the 2000s. So really, the feeling is that road traffic would have been much worse without a congestion charging scheme in that central London. But to maintain that deterrent effect, we have to keep reviewing the scheme. And there is a review underway, looking at increasing the charge from £15 to £18, but also to reduce the discounts and exemptions that we introduced some time ago for electric vehicles because of the huge rise and take-up of those electric vehicles. So yeah, keeping it under review is a key issue. Next slide. So turning to low emission zones, those focusing on air pollution, this slide really sets out the sort of progressive nature of the scheme since 2008. We looked at air pollution because we were told, certainly when Sadiq Khan was first elected, that it would take 193 years to get London's air pollution within UK legal pollution limits if the policies he'd inherited were to continue. For context, the same study looked at Paris, and Paris was told that it would take 20 years, given where they were. We also had huge health impacts, around 4,000 premature deaths a year, 500,000 Londoners living with asthma, and a huge cost, 10 billion cost to the NHS and social care by 2050, it was estimated, if air pollution wasn't tackled. So this was an issue of environmental justice, not just about health. And this sets out schemes introduced over time, targeting heavy vehicles initially, but then bringing in commercial vehicles and private vehicles. And of course, the infamous ultra-low emission zone was introduced in 2019 in the same small area as the congestion charge, that very light green in the centre, expanded in 21 to inner London, the next sort of darker green, and then London-wide in 23. Next slide. And these are the impacts. So we've just had a 1 year on after a year's operation of the scheme from August 23. And these are very, very significant emissions cuts here that you can see in NOx. We've also seen very strong emission cuts in PM 2.5 and CO2. So air quality has improved at 99% of monitoring sites across London since 2019. And I think one of the key things, going back to that point about environmental justice, for some of the most deprived communities living near London's busiest roads, where people who have little choice of where they live, and many not even owning a car, so therefore not contributing to the problem, we've seen an 80% reduction in people exposed to illegal levels of pollution. And for comparison, people living in the capital's most deprived areas are on average exposed to about a quarter more NO2 pollution. We're seeing London's air quality improving faster than the rest of England. And we've seen from our data no reduction in economic activity in outer London when we expanded the zone there. This was a big fear of local businesses. And we're actually seeing areas outside London benefiting, within 5 kilometres of the Greater London boundary, seeing NO2 concentration some 14% lower. So broader impact than just London. Next slide, please. But to be clear, the ultra-low emission zone or low emission zones aren't a silver bullet in terms of air pollution. They have to be part of a suite of policies and actions. So alongside bringing the ultra-low emission zone, we looked at cleaning up our bus fleet, electrifying our black cabs that you'll have seen around London, supporting that with better electric vehicle charging infrastructure, looking at pedestrianisation and cycling. And the key issue in outer London was people's feeling that they couldn't do sort of orbital movements around outer London. They could come in, but not sort of go to the nearest town centre. So we switched around bus routes to create a superloop, an orbital bus system as well. We had to show really, this action because we had to show we were leading by example with the fleets under the mayor's control before asking people to also then do something about their own behaviour. Yeah, sorry. So in terms of how we did it then, in the face of culture wars, so you'll have seen this, initially when we started with congestion charge and the low emission zone, there was some noise, but not as much as we've seen over the last few years, and you'll probably have seen this in your cities too. It's got much harder with misinformation and disinformation. We've seen court cases and cutting down cameras to even an explosive device. So again, the key issue here is that we had to start early with understanding where people's concerns were, engaging people who could act as champions, mothers with children and parents with children with asthma, doctors, powerful local leaders, community voices who could step up, speak up really, to be that voice of the silent majority. And a key thing for us was to be prepared for opposition and start early so that you incorporate those concerns into the design of your policies and initiatives. Next slide. So in terms of the lessons, the slide on the left showed what we inherited, some 455 schools in polluted areas. The slide on the right shows what we expect now. It's the current situation, about 20 schools now. So it's a massive drop in air pollution and those experiencing it. And these lessons here about integrating environment and equity from the start. So it's not just a transport issue, it's a local planning issue, it's a housing issue, it's a cultural strategy issue, engaging every tool that your city has or government has really to look at air pollution. We have to really look at shaping the media and the public narrative and make sure that you have champions. You have to build a case for change, better evidence on co-benefits and inequalities from trusted independent sources. Whether that's on inequalities or the economic benefits. We work with our business organisation, the CBI, to estimate the cost to business from lost days of sickness from workers. And that was very powerful in making the case for action. And then, of course, as we talked about that parallel action, you have to have help for people. So the mayor brought in a scrappage scheme and a series of exemptions and discounts in order to pave the way so that people felt that there was some help there. We can't help everybody, but that it really did sort of knock out most of the opposition. And as I've said, prepare for opposition early. And then in terms of the next slide, you'll see it's really been worth it. We've just seen earlier this year a report looking at how London has now met its legal air pollution, its UK pollution limits, NOT standards. Sadiq was told when he was first elected, as I said, it would take almost 200 years to get us into compliance. We've done that in just about 9 years, so under 10 years. This means that over 9 million people are now breathing cleaner air. We're seeing fewer children growing up with stunted lungs, and fewer people will have to suffer from asthma, dementia, and heart disease. And of course, the huge issue around public health, but also one of social justice. So it can be done. These are very big numbers and very big impacts. It isn't easy, but I think as long as you take some of those lessons to heart, I'm sure that you too can also follow this. We're seeing many other cities across the world taking their own action. So as cherry cities, some of the cities we're working with, from Jakarta to Johannesburg to Brussels to Bogota, Milan, many of those are looking at similar approaches, clean air zones. They don't have to be an ultra low emission zone. I think certainly in the global south cities, we're seeing their own version of a more holistic approach to how they look at tackling air pollution and congestion in their cities. Obviously, some of those cities will have more difficulties in terms of technical assistance and funding. But what is great to see is many of those cities are now taking this on board. So I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about what Oslo is doing too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shirley Rodrigues, for this very informative presentation. The health benefits are very, very big, and it can be done, you said at the end. So we see that we also can do it here in Austria, or also in, for example, in Germany. A lot of people from Germany are also listening today. I have one question. It was also from the participants. The revenues, the yearly revenues from congestion charge and the ultra-low emission zones. How much is it, and how much do you spend in improving the public transport, the cycling infrastructure?
I don't have the figures offhand, but I'll write it in the Q&A when I find them. But I think the key thing is any investment or any income from both the congestion charge and the ultra-low emission zone, or the low emission zones, are all ring-fenced to support public transport. So they're not sort of lost. So people can then see that it goes back to improving the transport system. That can be improving the roads or buses or whatever. That's after, obviously, the costs of the scheme, which are quite significant, because we have a huge camera network, a camera network now on the borders of London as well. So after those costs are taken into account, then it goes back in. So hugely helpful. But the costs of transport in London are massive. So it's not really, it's helpful, but it's not going to solve, say, another Elizabeth line in London, for example.
And are there also plans to put the ultra-low emission zone to a zero emission zone?
That was discounted by the Mayor of London in the last election campaign. It became, as you will no doubt have seen in many elections, a very strong argument. His view is that it really needs to be a national decision if we're taking forward zero emission zones, or bigger congestion charging schemes. We did look at some of these things, a border charge for people coming from outside London, because we have lots of commuters and people coming in, driving into shop. Could they pay that? So there are studies that look to this, and the sort of economic cost to businesses and to people's lives and so on. But it was discounted, and I think for the moment, I think what we're trying to do is make sure that the ultra low emission zone beds in. The current review of the congestion charging scheme, I think, has also caused some controversy, because I think the proposal to reduce the electric vehicle discount and residence discounts for people in that small area, because the benefits of we've seen massive take up of electric vehicles now, so really you're just starting to see more vehicles drive in. So the benefits of the congestion charge scheme of deterring traffic are being eroded. So we need to look at that as well.
And last question from me, are there any recommendations to cities considering implementing a system similar to London?
Well, some of the ones that I talked about there, you have to start early. And I think the biggest thing is understand what people's concerns are. So when you're designing the scheme, don't just think of it as a traffic scheme. It's about how people live in a city, and that means understanding what their concerns are. So bringing in some help, it doesn't necessarily mean a financial help, but it can be exemptions, discounts, so you've got time for people to prepare. Really analyze the data of who is most likely to be affected, and I guess don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Getting in something that really gets it going will give you a huge benefit, I think. And the communications point, obviously, engaging local people. So when you see that misinformation and disinformation, you have voices that are saying, actually, my daughter, my son, who is suffering from asthma, 1 week out of 4 is out of school. Those are the voices you need to elevate just as much as those people saying it's my right to drive anywhere that I like in a dirty vehicle.
Thank you very much, Shirley Rodrigues. There are some other questions in the Q&A sector, so please answer them and stay here.